your comments a minute ago are a perfect segue into my first question. The recovery of California's economy, as well as that right here in Nevada and Las Vegas, has been slower than that of the national average with the rest of the country. What are some of the operational changes that you guys have had to make since the recession in order to compensate? And what do each of you see as some of the bright spots for your respective businesses? And I guess we'll just start with Paul and work our way this way.
You know, really California for us has been more stable than some of the other states in this region. From our business, Arizona, Nevada, we're much harder hit and it's been longer. We took a proactive look and said, how are we going to respond to this? We have a little bit of a different equipment mix now, a lot less flatbeds, a lot more refrigerated trailers. People are still eating, they're just not building homes. And we've really changed our geographic diversity. If we look at our growth last year, it was in Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Montana. We start St. Louis on Monday. So it's actually been in different regions, in a broader region.
Okay. Very good. Scott?
Yeah, for us, back in 2009, we had an auto manufacturing plant in Fremont, California called NUMMI, New United Motors. And when General Motors got in trouble during the Great Recession, that was NUMMI's kind of way out of their only unionized plant in North America, in the world, actually, was NUMMI in Fremont. We were hauling virtually all the parts in and out of that facility for 25 years, the entire time they were in Fremont. At the time, through CTA again, I was able to get in front of the assembly members in Sacramento, and I said to them, prior to NUMMI shutting down, I said, is anybody in this room aware that there is a major manufacturer in the Bay Area that is about to shut their doors? Because they gave us a 6-month notice prior to shutdown. And they were all dumbfounded. They didn't have a clue. And I certainly informed them of what was pending and the 4,500 jobs that were going to go away and move to Texas, which they did in March of 2010. With that move, that certainly put a bind on our company. That was a major part of what we were doing at the time, aside from our LTL. It was similar to their operation as far as the dedicated piece. So fortunately for us, a door opened. When one closes, I believe another bigger, brighter door opens, and it certainly did with our Reliance Network coalition of carriers throughout the country, and that injected freight that we certainly weren't anticipating into our system that made us whole. But I think to more answer the question, we certainly had to make drawbacks and drawdowns during that time, and that was through 401k contribution reductions, through overtime adjustments as to what point we paid our hourly employees overtime, a little bigger cost share on medical expenses, all of those types of things that we had to adjust for because we weren't raising rates. We were just trying to keep the business that we had, and I think we all could say that we were not in a position to raise rates. We were not in a position to improve margins, so we had to cut costs, severely cut costs, and we did. Fortunately, now we're seeing that all come back, and we're improving our employees' compensation that we had to draw down on at the time. But that was, I think, the biggest adjustment we had to make in the interim of a loss of one big piece of business and the gain and realization of another.
Okay. And Noel, your thoughts operating, obviously, the Central California District of UPS. What have you seen in terms of impact on your business with California's slow recovery?
Well, let me just respond to the initial economic issue in the U.S. You know, California being the largest economy was the most impacted. So obviously in 08, 09, I think those years for us were reactive like everyone in this room. I mean, you know, no one likes less, right? So you don't wake up in the morning and go less. Your personal paycheck, you don't like less. You don't like less profits. You know, one thing that we can all agree on is in this room is that no matter what party you're in from a political perspective, but we're all in the profit party, right? So you got to make ends meet. And so what we did was very much like the other two companies here is we cut overtime. We started focusing on variable expense first. The one thing that we didn't want to get into was devaluing our human capital. The most important part of our business is the culture of our business. You are your people. You are not a truck. You are not a building. You're not a tire. You're the people in that stuff. They're the ones that talk to your clients, and they have to have a certain modicum of behavior. So we actually went on a very strong offensive around that issue. And we had a strong play towards our people where we didn't keep secrets from them. We put every significant relevant number that was going to cost them in the long term in front of them. And our reaction was pretty good. My unit happens to be the most profitable in the organization when you talk about per employee. So the way our CEO sees California is it is the most profitable business unit in the company. That's including international business units. That's including subsidiaries. So when you look at the 11,000 people and the $2 billion we generate on an annual basis in California, it's the most profitable. So we have a viewpoint of that space that is somewhere we're going to be because of what it gives us. And so we didn't cut so much cost as to cut in the bone, right? So we couldn't cut so much cost as to get the people that use us like Staples, Costco, Amazon in any kind of trick bag. They need what they need. You know, you need the equipment, you need the people to do for them what you need to do for them. And I think you have to be very careful of that. So our response was similar, but I think the difference was we put it in front of our people. I attended hundreds of meetings with my senior staff in front of our drivers so that they could hear from the top that, you know, we need more efficiency, cut miles, 1 mile matters. I mean, we did those things. And so much of our cost benefit came from their, you know, participation, quite frankly. And we did pretty well with that.
Okay. You know, a lot of what we see nationwide in terms of the equipment replacement cycle has been stretched as far as it's ever been due to the recession. And now that we're coming out of that, the fleets that are replacing their equipment are not doing so to add capacity. It's simply, the overwhelming majority is replacement. And obviously that's had an impact on fleet ability to raise their freight rates by keeping capacity constrained somewhat. Are you guys doing the same thing in your operations, or are you, is it to the point now, the recovery to the point where you're actively looking at expanding the size of your operations in terms of power units?
I'll go first.
Okay, yeah. On the Estenson side, the experience has been very different from our traditional truckload. Like I said in my presentation, we started 2000 basically with 2 trucks, and now we're over 700. So we're very committed in that segment to grow 20% a year while maintaining our margins on the bottom end. And so we have a challenge ahead of us there. And we've been able to do that even through the downturn. On the truckload side, it's not been so easy. It's more about been replacement equipment and holding our own. So we've kind of seen the both sides of it through the downturn.
But on the truckload side, it's almost 100% replacement.
Largely replacement. I mean, we have a small startup in St. Louis, Monday, which is a 5-truck deal. So it's not significant, but we're not adding 20% capacity on the truckload side,
right?
For sure.
And for us, again, we're starting to see, I think, general rate increases take hold and improve our bottom line. So for us, it's more of getting improved bottom line and not drilling the top line so much as we did last year, because we grew at a 14% clip last year. But it was expensive to grow at that kind of a clip for us. So this year we've kind of readdressed that in regards to efficiencies. As Noel says, communicating to our people how to be more efficient, where we need to create those efficiencies, and not so much growth for us anyway. It's a matter of holding our market share, seeing an improved bottom line this year, and if we see a 3 to 5% overall growth rate. I think for us, we're seeing improved revenue with lesser volume, which obviously is through rate increases and efficiencies. And that's what we're shooting for right now, just improved margins overall.
Yeah, I think, you know, I said this at the panel I sat on before, that this industry, you know, freight's different. And, you know, I'm always talking to companies about freight, you know, significantly about freight, and how they can leverage the movement in a freight configuration versus small package configurations. But freight's different because the industry has a legacy of killing each other. It does. It has a legacy of killing each other. The people that are in the space will kill each other in order to keep business. I think rate increases and minimizing those, we didn't do that. Our customers thought we were out of our minds. But we put a 4.9 rate increase on the table in 08, 09, 10, 11, 12. It's one thing to have to go back in there and negotiate that from 4.9 to 1. But the message that you won't do it, I live with small business owners. They always do it. You look at the technology industry, and I see this up close, where certain like industries, aftermarket car parts, people that sell accessorial technologies, they get into that game and they end up killing each other. So I think rate increases non-rate increases send a message that you get closer to becoming a commodity. And I think you have to be careful of how the organization approaches that, right? I just do, because value is driven by the service you give. You buy, I buy, we buy based on how we're treated on the other side of that, quite frankly. You didn't take a different opinion of a Lexus or Mercedes because there was a bad economy. And your opinion of something you didn't like didn't improve because of a bad economy. So I think you got to always have a strategy of your base of customers to make the relationship so incredibly good, they're not willing to give it up. And I think that the freight industry, when you look at the rate chart, it tells a story of what customers expect. 88 off, 82 off, 90 off. I mean, those are just bad numbers. We don't do that in our ground commercial business. We give off 20% to volume accounts. You got to be really big. I mean, I'll get up, and seriously, and this is not for the effect of this room. I mean, understand, I negotiate the contracts in Los Angeles through my sales team. When they walk in and go, we're getting an 80 on this customer, they're asking for a 3 or 4%, and we go through that whole iteration. I say no to a lot of people. I say no to a lot of people. I mean, I honestly do. I walk in and go, let me tell you the rate that's not on the rate chart, free. It's not on there. And let me tell you that if a price of a gallon of gas is like wood in this business. If you're building if you call up a person to make a fence for your house, they're not selling you wood. They're providing the service to put it up. That's this business. You can't let people think they can escape the raw material increased cost. Because if you do it, that's their job. Kind of like a 2-year-old. If I put a red ball on that floor and there's a 2-year-old over there, his responsibility is to get that ball. And anyone in between him and that ball is going to get absolute hell, right? An owner of a company like you have an obligation to negotiate the best deal. How we participate in that is a choice.
Okay. Scott, I know you guys, putting on your CTA hat for a minute, you guys came out swinging in April against CARB. There was a study done by the Stonebridge Associates that estimated that the combination of the low carbon fuel standard that CARB put out, as well as the cap and trade, could increase the price of diesel in the state of California to $6.69 a gallon. That represents an almost $2.50 gap between California and neighboring states. With that kind of as the backdrop and the increases in fuel prices that are in California versus the rest of the country, how do you guys work with shippers and brokers for compensation? I know you mentioned fuel surcharge earlier, but how has that been? I know Noel just touched on that, but how has it been for you and then for Paul?
For us, again, it's a matter of, and I hear this from our network partners, which are sizable regional LTLs. The one increase they can get, and we know this too, is fuel surcharge. Because we all feel the pain at the pump. We all see the prices posted. But when we go in for a general rate increase or any other type of increase other than fuel, it's much more difficult to sell. But fuel is fuel is fuel. And I think we've reserved ourselves to saying an increase is an increase is an increase, be it fuel or otherwise. If you can get it on one side and the other, that's great. But in most cases, we sell the fuel surcharge a lot easier. An example is we have an account that moves from Vegas to Reno every night. It's the one and only lane that we have that's triples. We pulled 3 trailers together. We need to have that happen in California, by the way. But anyway, we pulled
Good luck.
triples, moving what you see out here on the casino floor, slot machines, every night, back and forth. We just went to that account. It's our single biggest account in our company. And we had no fuel for them. We went in, kind of like Noel's saying, you go in, you get the business at maybe this level, and gosh darn it, by a year or so, you hope to get a little pop and make a little more money off of that deal. And lo and behold, we did that. We said, we need a 10% fuel surcharge this year, folks. We've been doing it for 1 year, exception-free service. Never missed a beat in getting those things to and from their destination. That's something to be said, and that service is what obviously backs up what you're asking for. And guess what? We understand fuel, but tell you what, when it drops to $3.75 a gallon, we want to get a reduction. No problem. $3.75, we'll give you that reduction. But that's what's happening.
And Paul, as far as hauling freight in and out of the state of California, as you often do, maybe comment on how you approach DOE lane specific and what the challenges are there as you cross into the state and how those fuel surcharges change en route.
You know, and that's really probably the biggest pushback is from the largest shippers, the first or second largest retailer in the world, and they say we pay a national DOE fuel surcharge. Well, going in and out of California, it really doesn't work because the price of fuel is so different in this region, whether it's California alone or in the western region. So it's always a negotiation. If we don't get it in the fuel surcharge, and we do have to adapt to their table, we must run 100 different fuel surcharge tables in our system, because everyone wants to be unique, but we put it on the bottom. That's got to be in the base rate. If they won't take it in the fuel surcharge, they've got to take that in the base rate, and we're going to peg it high. And if it goes down, that's to our benefit, because if it goes up, it's going to be to their benefit. So we typically set that number high. The bigger issue we have on the truckload side is really with the brokers. You know, the brokers will say, well, I'll pay you $1,600 to do this load. Well, how much do I get for fuel? Well, fuel's included. Well, no, it's not. You know, and so it's been an education with my staff that we've got to have fuel on every number. I don't want anything rolled in. I want to see exactly what my base is and what the customer's showing me for paying for fuel.
Now, moving on into some more regulatory questions, CARB's reasoning for a lot of what they've done in the past years is you're going to see an ROI in fuel economy. And I love this story. A colleague of mine went around at a recent ATA trade show and added up all of the different promised fuel savings, and he came up with 120% fuel savings by the time you add low rolling resistance tires and aero skirts and those types of things. So at that point, you'd actually be producing fuel somehow. But and that's not to say that those things don't actually, have obviously fuel economy benefits. But what has it been like now that these regulations are starting to take hold and you guys are purchasing equipment to meet these regulations? How is the hard cost for equipment speccing shaken out from an ROI standpoint? And this is, I guess, would really be for Noel.
Yeah, I'm just going to say again, and I said it before, and I'll say it 1,000 times. You need to focus on technology improvements more than you focus on trying to control people that drive regulations. I mean, you got to play in that regulation space. I'm not minimizing that, because there's people that will enact some crazy stuff. But technology, let me tell you that an industry you're going to never hear that cares even remotely about regulation, they don't. And I'll tell you in a minute, they don't. Regulation, California being tough to do business in, go to Silicon Valley. You know, I go up there and speak. My brother's an engineer, and I went to Microsoft about 3 months ago and spoke at a conference. That's because they have robust, knowledgeable people. They have really, really, really smart people. And so where everything great is created is there. But the way that the industry, our industry, is going to be served best is through driving R&D around technology. You're not going to see heavy diesel use 50 years from now. I mean, think about it through that lens. You know, you can't think about 2, 3, and 4 years from now, because that's what happens. And I said in the other one that if you had a tractor that the same one, this is 2012, if you had 2002s right now today, you're in pretty bad shape. If you had 1992s, you're in worse shape. If you had 1982s, I mean, so if you just think about it through that lens. So when you think about equipment and what it's going to look like for your company 10, 15 years from now, I mean, you got to think about 10, 15 years from now. So you have to plug into, and right now LNG is really going to end up being a very powerful technology because we're going to put a lot of pressure on this country and this government, as we do in California, to put in the infrastructure for that, for sure.
And we'll get to LNG next, but back to the ROI that you're seeing.
I think for us, our fleet averages right about 7.2 miles per gallon on average. And our fear was, with urea-injected diesel engines and so on, that we're going to see a decrease in fuel economy. That was the big scare out there, I think, a year or two ago. We're now running those, and everybody I've talked to in our own experience is improved fuel economy, which is obviously a positive. But again, the question is ROI on skirting trailers. Okay, that's yet to be seen, I think, for us and many others. But, you know, in essence, I think, like Noel says again, it's if you run an aged fleet, and we're a fleet that keeps our trucks a while. We don't turn them every 3 to 5 years. If you do, you're in great shape. But our model has not been that way, as maybe some in the room are the same, and members we've talked to are the same, where now we have got to do such an accelerated change of equipment. It all boils down to a financial challenge. Now, the ROI is, again, I think remains to be seen on the new technology, but I think one of us mentioned the effects of this new technology on durability is a whole other equation that you need to factor in. How much is that truck down? You know, I just wrote in my Caltrux article about the guinea pig effect that we all, I think, have felt, that we're testing new technology and emission controls that were unproven. And new engines by a lot of the OEMs that are now manufacturing their own designs in power plants that in some cases are unproven. And that's, I don't know how you measure that, you know, in regards to downtime and pure heartache in regards to that new truck is less dependent than that old truck. And that's definitely a challenge for our industry right now.
Now, moving on to alternative fuels for a minute, Paul, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you guys had an experiment where you were testing. Was it CNG or LNG that you were?
It was CNG.
CNG at the time. And that was a 9-liter?
Yes.
Is that correct? After having that experience, where do you see now True Line's next foray really into alternative fuel adoption, and what do you think that likely a solution will be, whether it's CNG or LNG?
You know, I think that as you look out, kind of to Noel's point, 20 years, what is going to be the fuel for our industry? And I think clearly it's going to be natural gas. The problem that we perceive is the equipment manufacturers are responding too slow. I was talking to another business owner, and he was at a conference, and they're talking, this one guy said, this one manufacturer said, we're going to build 350 natural gas trucks. And he's all excited. He said, I'll take all of them. What are you going to do for the rest of the industry? You know, so, and the other thing that really needs to come down from an ROI standpoint is they need to build a whole bunch more so they gain that economies of scale so they can close that price differential between the clean diesel and the natural gas. Right now with a $50,000 or $60,000 spread, depending on your length of haul and how many miles you're going to run that truck in a year, you can't generate enough miles and have enough cost savings between the gas and the natural gas and the diesel to pay back for that technology over a short period of time. So we really think that we need the equipment manufacturers to accelerate the process. I think the industry as a whole is willing to accept it. We think California is a perfect market for it. We're also looking at it with a customer of capturing methane gas from dairy farms and turning that into a fuel product. So we really think alternative is the wave of the future. We've never liked to be on the bleeding edge of things. Don't mind the leading edge, but don't like the bleeding edge. And that's why we do so much testing on the front side.
Yeah, we've seen it, in the market there's a 9-liter solution and a 15-liter solution. And of course, next year, getting to your point about OEMs rolling out equipment, we'll have a 12 and a 13-liter option, which I think will really be that sweet spot for the market, where we'll really see adoption. But until, on the other side of that equation is the infrastructure development. And there's several companies that are kind of out there leading the charge, one of which is Clean Energy, who has, I believe, as of now, 8 LNG operations in a partnership with Pilot Flying J. But, they've promised 70 by the end of this year. Well, to get there, they're going to be opening at a rate of 2 a week. at some point. And I think until that infrastructure is really developed, it really will remain a niche market. But I don't know, you've had a lot of experience with alternative fuels, and what do you see as the fuel option of choice for an operation such as yours?
It's going to be some hybrid composition. It's going to be some hybrid state of electric, natural gas. We have hybrid hydraulic that we're testing from a transmission perspective. And I tell you, these hybrid hydraulic transmissions, these things will be infinite almost. And are they expensive? Yes. But when we sit down and talk about it, particularly at this level, when the organization does anything significant, they bring the presidents in, they have a conversation with us about this stuff. Number one, because we have a lot of investment in the company, number one, bucket load. And then number two, we have to be the advocates for it on the ground, right? And it makes sense. We're 105. We want to be 210, okay? We want to do this again. You're not going to do it again living on technology that's not going to get you there. And what takes businesses out of business the fastest is that. And what happens is someone else comes along, backed by VC or whatever, and I just want to say, that could happen. A foreign supported transportation company could land here tomorrow and put 17,000 LNG trucks on the street. And they could be owned by another country. You don't have to have U.S.-owned freight operate here, just like DHL came in. So the same thing that's hurt us in some areas of our economy, if we believe that 2012 is not going to happen, then we need to worry about this, okay? So if you're talking about how many companies in here are older than 30? There you go. We needed more than that many 30 years ago. So I just can't say enough that our learnings at UPS are on steroids. And every new vehicle we get now, every single one, is some alternative fuel vehicle. We have stopped investing almost totally in pure diesel or pure gasoline.
Interesting. Okay, Scott, have you guys done anything yet on alternative fuels? And if not, what is going to be that catalyst that really gets you to start to think about it?
Again, I think for us, we've definitely looked at the hybrid technology. Natural gas, we've definitely not gone there yet. But on the hybrid, as an example, we demoed a straight truck bobtail on a hybrid. Because my thinking is similar to what these gentlemen are saying, is how do we get to the next level of energy source in our industry? And when you look at, again, I have to speak from a perspective of dollars and cents, because I own the company, and it's a matter of what makes financial sense. And without enough incentives out there, I think you might be able to tap $20,000 on a $180,000 hybrid truck. That's out of the picture for a fleet like us right now. It's just not in the equation. So it's really, and I've heard that again from a number of fleets out there, small to mid-size, that say until there's more government incentive to do so, yeah, we want to be proactive. That's no question about that. We need to get there, but how can we get there with public and private funding?
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for their time. Before you guys go anywhere, I'd like to allow, I know we're a little bit behind schedule here, but we've got a 30-minute break. We're going to eat into that a little bit. I'd like the opportunity for the audience to ask this esteemed panel of speakers some questions.
Thank you. I'd just like to commend, first of all, Randall Riley and CTA for this forum. It's fantastic, and the doctor, I would have liked to hear him go on for quite a while. One element not to forget is the industry's involvement in affecting change and educating the legislature. CTA members, a lot of my friends here in the room have done quite a bit of that. Frankly, we need a lot more help. We need financial support by carriers belonging and supporting their state trucking associations, as well as the ATA, who's been very helpful. But to give you a little perspective, my family company is third generation. We're based in San Francisco Bay Area, and I always like to say that we're like the early warning system. So if you live outside of California, things like CARB and all the environmental stuff we do, I don't know that anybody that doesn't live in our state truly understands it. And if you live in the Central Valley or Southern California, outside of the LA ports, who have had big challenges meeting the environmental requirements, you may understand it. I live on the San Francisco Peninsula in the center of Silicon Valley, and my neighbors are the ones that think that with the internet you don't need trucking. And maybe, I'll give them a little benefit of the doubt, maybe they think the local FedEx truck or UPS truck is actually connected to the internet, but the logistics and the supply chain, totally out of their realm. But my neighbors, they want to be green, so they think, okay, if I have solar panels on my roof, and if I drive a hybrid car, I'm doing my thing. They don't even like windmills because they slaughter birds. They don't want to put solar panels out in the desert because it might affect turtles' sex lives. So we've got to ask ourselves, what can you do? Now, I really think that natural gas is a big solution. And I just found out a few weeks ago about this Monterey shale thing, which is really interesting. Now today I hear that there's something in Bakersfield. That's going to be a really hard sell to develop that in California. So all of you, everybody here, if you have operations in the West, and especially California, you've got to get out, you've got to meet with legislators, you've got to come to California, you've got to tell the story, because just like Obama said last week, that everybody's doing fine in the private sector, the local legislators in California certainly believe that, maybe a factor of 10 more than he says. And the regulators like CARB are probably a factor of 1,000 in their misunderstanding. They just think that we can buy all this new technology and implement it over the next few short years, and we just pass it on. So we've got our work cut out for us. So that's another component, besides all the great stuff that we're talking about in technology-wise. We've got to get to the people that make decisions that affect us and really start to educate them on how freight moves in this country.
Great. Another one back there.
This question's for Scott. You're running refrigerated trailers.
I'm not. Paul is.
So, running refrigerated trailers in California, being based in California, with the financial impact, after 7 years, are you retrofitting equipment? Are you selling equipment? Or are you sending it out of state? What do you find most beneficial to you?
You know, we did a little bit of both when the regulations first came out. We brought in some new equipment. We retrofitted some of our better old equipment. And that was kind of our plan. I think as we go forward, we'll be cycling it out. You know, it becomes the floors on the trailers, much more than just the unit itself. Probably the interesting thing, though, is we spent all that expense and all that effort to make those changes, and in probably 3 years, we've had one trailer inspected. So maybe we shouldn't have done anything. I don't know. Yeah, we feel good about that, too.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
This question is for Mr. Massey. You mentioned that all your new vehicle purchases are some form of alternative fuel. I assume that includes LNG and electric and hybrid, usual suspects. Is that decision based on the economics, the ROI of vehicle performance and operations, or is it done to placate regulators, or in what percentage is it to placate the regulators? Also, does that include the normal vehicles? Do you have hybrid cars in the mix, or are they separate?
We have every dimension of our fleet is impacted with that thought process, and there's a number of dimensions and the reason why we do it. You're in the freight space primarily, we're not. When you talk about what percent of our business is just purely freight, it's not even a fair comparison to say that the way that these gentlemen have to do business looks like the way that I have to do business that way. Law firms, professional entities, the people that butter the bread for us really are in that healthcare. Healthcare is huge. Let me tell you what's not going to go down in this country is healthcare. So when you go talk to Abbott Labs or Inogen, they're not shipping in dirty trucks. I'm just going to tell you that. They buy the carbon neutral solution from us. We offer a carbon neutral solution. They pay more for a carbon neutral solution. They don't care because the people that buy from them want a carbon neutral solution, and yada, yada, yada. So when we make the investment, is because strategically our sustainability platform is something customers are paying for. They're buying it. And we know this from the research we did on it early. So, that's the main thrust of the dimension we do it in has everything to do with our business strategy. So when you talk about ROI, there's a lot of customers that wouldn't use us and they would go somewhere else to a competitor or have that if we didn't have it. So ROI isn't just on the improvement in miles per gallon. I think, that typically becomes a conversation, right? Miles per gallon, how much am I saving on that? And that's real. There's got to be an ROI. I just think that the difficult space, obviously, is knowing the businesses that didn't keep up with the folks in this room. You don't look like the businesses you replaced 40 years ago. Did they ever see that coming? I think it's that serious of an issue. This is not idealism. I'm not marginalizing the challenges here. And I do agree that, and where I go with it, and I really need to say this, because I do so much of this, and I think it has an influence. I know it does. Is where I go with it is to the source. There needs to be solutions to keep him in business, period. And there needs to be solutions to keep him in business, period. And you can't allow things that are toxic to the industry to just fester. But I also tell you that you've never been receptive, any of you in this room, ever, to someone that walked in and started yelling at you. If this industry keeps having a reputation of being toxic, you're no different than the environmentalists. They go, oh, the environmentalists are here. That's how the politician's going to see it. Just saying. So, I'm interested in conversation, and Bruce McCray is great at this when we talk about it, that actually moves the needle. Because we go in and make sense to somebody. So there has to be government support the same way we support infrastructure, roads, ports, right? We'll spend $1 billion in a heartbeat to take care of the Los Angeles Long Beach port. Okay, you're just as important because nothing gets out of that port without you. So we have to do a great job of making sure they don't forget that so that they support this transition with this technology that's necessary for the clean air and the betterment that they want. We have to do that.
Can I touch on that?
Sure, please.
If I could add to that, Noel, with CTA again at the table, we had a meeting with CARB just a couple of weeks ago, myself, Eric, Chris, and Matt Schrapp, our environmental policy chair. The purpose of the meeting was to get with the deputy director of CARB and us as an association and industry to start the dialogue that you're talking about. Not the guy that comes in and starts screaming and yelling at them, but the association and the industry that is working with them towards compliance, towards understanding one another's challenges, and towards ultimate enforcement. Because we're all making an investment here in our future and in our companies, and those that aren't are not going to be around for one thing, but how long will they fly under the radar? And CARB says to us, well, you would agree that no regulation is 100% enforceable. We said, well, you got a point there because the CHP BIT program has never been 100% enforced either. But we're here to say we're trying to bridge that gap now that says, yeah, we fought long and hard against the regulation. We're standing here today, it's in place, it's in force in a full effect, We're trying to comply, but you have to understand the challenges of industry to get there. And that's really, I think, the crux of our future relationship with CARB, is understanding the challenge, equal and fair enforcement, and that open line of communication, not the divide that we've had.